Night vision is totally a superpower. I know you told me it was. I didn't believe you. I know you said don't finance it, but I went ahead and did. Totally happy about it. If someone is out here in the dark, they're at such a disadvantage. I'm like, how did the Taliban win? It just goes to show that like it wasn't the boots on the ground. It was the politicians that ruined it all. But, yeah, we can go to In-N-Out, we can go to Sonic, we can go to McDonald's, we can take pictures, we can shoot occasionally, maybe. But like, we are gods out here. I mean, we're basically Batman.
Drew, no! What happened? Where'd that even come from? Drew! I'm sorry! What did that?
Oh, you thought darkness was your ally.
What? Bro, we were just LARPing! I'm sorry, what did we do?
You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
It's becoming an undisputed fact that for both the professional soldier and the prepared citizen, having both night vision and thermal capabilities is the best way to stay alive or stay ahead of what's potentially coming. So we've had a lot of time, me and Josh, running bridged units. And what I mean by saying bridge or dual thermal night vision units is you have a PVS-14 night vision unit in one eye and a thermal unit in the other eye, and you're running them simultaneously on your helmet. The question we always get is, but how do you do that on a budget? Because the price for both of those items is so high, it's almost unobtainium for the normal average everyday person. So what we have here today is the most budget-friendly option that we feel even comfortable talking about to help you guys get into the thermal night vision game if, based on what we say, you think that's something that's going to work for you.
Now, to be able to pull off this video and get a bunch more information ourselves, we needed a couple of items. We needed a bridge to be able to take the 14 that I already owned to host a thermal on the other side, as well as the thermal itself. So Raven is one of the sponsors of this video, and they're the manufacturer of the bridge. Armacite is the manufacturer of the thermal units themselves. And those are the items that we got sent to us at a budget price point to be able to test alongside a 14. So a little bit of a disclaimer for you guys as far as what's going on. We don't get to keep that thermal. Armacite's not paying for the video itself, but we did need those items to be able to test and experiment with these units.
Specifically because they are budget thermals. We have a better thermal unit that's in the $4,500, $5,000 price range, but that doesn't fit the budget category that we're talking about.
Now, when it comes to bridging these, not having a fused unit where you have thermal and night vision together, the internet seems to have its own opinion about night vision is really good at positive identification and navigation, and on the other side, thermal is excellent at detection, but only detection. So when you first put night vision and thermal on your head at the same time, it is, I don't care what units you have, it's not as intuitive as putting on dual tubes. You're getting two different images at the same time and your brain is trying to process that. So just navigating or just walking through an open terrain, your brain is still trying to swap back and forth and decide which image it's going to prioritize. I never tried to visually fuse the two together. I was flipping back and forth very quickly. Night vision 1 second, thermal 1 second, night vision 1 second, thermal 1 second. And that was mentally fatiguing, but I could process both together. The more realistic system for me is just if I am walking and I'm not looking for someone or trying to detect something, I just look through my night vision. Even if the thermal was down, I would prioritize that image.
So everything that I thought whenever I put those on was in comparison to the RH25, which I have ran quite a bit and is it's a much steeper price point, so it's not a budget thermal. So I was kind of comparing it to that, but with that being said, I was pleasantly surprised because the level of detail and quality of that is good, but it's not so amazing that it contrasts with the PVS-14. So like the clarity of looking through a night vision tube is still not like, you're not looking at a screen. Mm-hmm. It's like you're looking through night vision binoculars or whatever you want to call it. With a higher end thermal units, it's like you're looking at a really crisp LCD screen. And because that one is a little bit more budget, it actually kind of matches the PVS-14 really well. So, and also knowing your brightness settings and knowing like, hey, I need to turn down the brightness of the thermal so it matches the brightness of your PVS 14, it makes a huge difference. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. It didn't bother me. I actually found with the budget option,
It was preferred.
it was preferred in terms of comfort. Definitely was not preferred in terms of detection on the move. So I didn't get any sort of eye strain. I wasn't super exhausted running that, whereas running the R8 or the RH25 on a bridge system, I was absolutely getting eye fatigue, neck fatigue because of the additional weight. That's another thing about these budget ones. They're pretty lightweight, which is really nice. We have the even cheaper version, not as good quality as the 640. What's this, like a 340 or
320?
320. Very lightweight, so it's basically no difference between that and dual tubes in terms of fatigue. Moving at the same time, like navigating while you're trying to observe and detect things doesn't work as well because the image kind of blurs. And I noticed whenever I was trying to look for you in the woods, actually at one point you were further ahead of me just on a patrol, and I was scanning like I normally would under night vision or a higher end thermal unit, and it was just nice, clean checks from side to side. But I noticed that with the budget option, your thermal image is blurring, it's smearing, and it doesn't have time to pick up a heat signature as you're crossing it. So what it forced me to do was change the way that I was moving my head to scan my sectors. It would, instead of a quick pan left and right, it was a bump.
So you're biting off like pieces of the pie.
Exactly. So you're giving the thermal time to process the heat that it could potentially see, rather than just expecting it to pick up really quickly like on the higher end units.
And also because there's such a contrast but with the heat, and keep in mind trees and rocks are putting off heat as well, because there's such a contrast between black and white or blue and red or white and red. Your brain, it's not just the thermal, you have to add on top of that your brain has to process those color patterns and palettes as well. So there's just more work to be done when you're processing through thermal.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed in navigating and trying to detect at the same time was the way that budget units gauge depth and use the heat signatures to like create a depth for you. Like for example, I was looking at a hillside. A mile in the distance was a tree line, and you were only 200 meters away from me on the top of that hill, but because of the way that it shows you depth and tries to give you some understanding of like, you know, terrain, it was casting the tree line a mile behind you as the same heat color as you, only 100 meters in front of me on the hill.
Sure, and that's something else that's worth pointing out. Even if you are spending buku bucks on very high-end thermal, there are properties that people can take into account where if the sun just set and you know that a rock formation behind you is very warm, you can blend in and hide there. Now, higher-end thermal is going to detect a little bit better, obviously, but that principle is still true regardless of what price point you're spending your money on with thermal.
Yeah, and I noticed I would have to, if I cycled through the color settings to go to like white hot or red hot, it would do a little bit better depending on, you know, what the situation was. Guys, if you are looking to get into night vision, which we do recommend before getting into thermal, just because it allows you to navigate and see and do things in the night, Steel Industries is a great place to check out. They've been friends of ours for years. We've had a long-standing relationship with them, and those guys know their stuff. Their customer service team is amazing. They have units in stock all the time. It's not hard to get, it's fast shipping, and those guys actually go out and use the equipment that they sell. So they're authorities on the matter, they understand the stuff, and even if you're not ready to buy night vision, you can hit them up with night vision questions and they'll answer you. So as far as night vision is concerned, they're the place to go. There's a lot of good companies out there, but Steel, we love those guys and they're awesome. You should check them out. So one thing that I've noticed whenever you have a group of guys and you're all running night vision is you kind of move, you get sussed or you get lulled into moving with reckless abandon, because you can see everything. You can see minuscule light sources. You can see a flicker of a fire a mile away on the trees and know that someone's there. So you tend to just walk around with reckless abandon. With running a more budget, and even with like higher end thermal, you can just walk around and you're fully able to detect pretty much everything around you the moment like a head were to pop up over or out from around a tree. But with the budget thermal option, it actually kind of forces you to do things the right way, because you can't get away with that because of the image blurring. So it forces you to stop, look, listen, observe. Okay, no heat signatures, great. Let's move to that next piece of cover and I'm gonna do my seals again. So that was actually kind of cool that it forced you to kind of do it the right way.
It is worth noting that running something like this setup is wildly different. Well, in fact, night vision as well is wildly different running in an urban environment versus just a rural environment. Let's take thermal as a whole just for a moment. You have cars, you have generators, you have buildings, you have so many different devices that are setting off heat. And so there's a lot more information for your brain to process. I will say, because I don't have nearly as much depth, I'm not trying to see a mile down a road in an urban environment. Despite the fact that this is at a $3,000 price point, that thermal unit did a phenomenal job at giving me the information that I was trying to see, even just to navigate. But there is more stuff putting out heat that there was more work for me to do. For example, someone stepping out of a car or getting into a car, if that car has been running, it's hot, and now the human being is hot as well, and it can be really difficult to actually understand, is that person standing behind the engine block or in front of the engine block? So little things like that just take practice to comprehend. Now on the night vision side, if the grid isn't down, there are street lights, there are car headlights, there are buildings, there are security cameras that are putting out so much light pollution that the night vision is crisp and it is performing at its best. So it's not necessarily that we're saying in an urban environment, everything is different. No, it's just that there is a different amount of work that needs to be done with these units in an urban environment.
We just went to a city and we started walking around the block, and in most buildings there's windows on the front. So like you still only if you're looking through thermal, all you're seeing is what's on the outside because it can't look through glass. But night vision can. If there's an ambient light coming through, or if there's a business that's still open late at night, you can still see with night vision. Thermal, you can't get that at all. So I would say like 95% of urban navigation and detection, at least in our little bit of experience, night vision checked all the boxes way better than thermal would have. But there's a few select cases where if we were running a dual bridge and we had thermal, we'd be thankful that we did. Like when you're looking into doorways that might be slightly open and it's super dark back there, if you don't want to have to punch IR light through there to see with your night vision, you could at least pick up a heat signature with the thermal. Same thing for at distance, being able to see with night vision. Like there was this one point where I was looking across a massive parking lot to see like people playing. They weren't bad guys, they were just kids playing in it, like riding bicycles around. I couldn't tell what was going on with night vision because there's just a lot of ambient light, photonic barriers, things like that, not a lot of detail, but with a thermal unit, I could absolutely pick out, okay, there are people moving over there, those are bodies. So 95% of the time, night vision's good. 5% of the time, you'll be glad you had thermal.
Now everyone knows even in the daytime, there's a big difference. Think even just red dots and LPVOs. There's a big difference between seeing someone at 300 yards and seeing color patterns, how big that human being is, what they're holding in their hands, body language, things like that. Well, how does that compare and contrast with night vision and thermal?
And again, this goes back to your budget option. When you're using a budget thermal device, your ability to pick up on things that would positively identify someone or discernible features of someone kind of goes out the window for the most part. I know with the higher end options, yeah, I can pick somebody out. I can see like, oh, it's Culver here, they have a plate carrier on, or they're a man or a woman.
It is man.
I can tell somewhat what kind of clothes they're wearing, if they're wearing a ball cap, but with the budget options at distance, at like 100 meters, 150 meters, no, like you can't tell.
And there is digital zoom built into this thermal unit, which is nice, but it's just zooming into the image that you already have, so it becomes incredibly pixelated. There is a time and a place for it where at 100 yards, I can tell whether that's a dog or a deer. but I can't necessarily tell whether that deer is male or female, if they have antlers or not. So there are limitations to what it is that you have seeing and positively identifying at distance. With that in mind though, what about CQB in an urban environment, positively identifying inside of, at the most, we probably saw inside of that building 20 yards at the deepest depth. What was your experience with that?
It depends on the type of CQB you're doing. I feel weird talking about CQB just as a nobody that hasn't actually had to stick a muzzle in someone before, apart from milsim. But I will say that of the two different types where you have like deliberate or you have a driving force and you're going fast versus more deliberate, slow, methodical, there's a really big difference. And if you're trying to use a budget thermal, or I would even say a high-end thermal, and you're trying to go fast, it's not going to work well. You can't process fast enough, and the motion that's going on in your left eye with a thermal is just unusable. So it forces you to, it's very good for moving slow and methodical. I've been in buildings before where it is absolutely pitch black. Night vision, even the best night vision that you can get, is just a bunch of grain. There's no light sources. The building is airtight as far as light is concerned. And in those cases, thermal, even budget thermal, is really good if you're moving literally at a snail's pace, just trying to pick up any sort of heat signature.
And while PID is great, you're probably not buying this system, if you are gonna buy something like this, with just solely the idea of walking alone in the woods. You're probably thinking about using this in conjunction with whether it is milsim or adult milsim. How are you actually going to pull triggers with this system? So we took a little bit of time and shot both at like 200 yards at a target that had been heated up. The shooter didn't know exactly where the target was. They had to turn around and find it. I've done this a little bit more than you, being that this was probably your first time with this system, shooting at 200 yards at an unknown target. What was your gut reaction?
Well, initially I was quickly looking around for the target like I would with night vision or just normally during the day without anything, and I couldn't see anything because of, again, the motion blur and the refresh rate. So once I stopped and was like, okay, scan, scan, scan. Okay, I see a heat signature now. I'm going to the 14. I'm going to prioritize that and take my shots.
Could you see it with the 14?
No, I couldn't see it with the 14, so I had to use the laser and the illuminator to create a shadow or find the contrast between the target and the background. So it was still difficult.
Yeah, so even a target standing that had been painted at 200 yards on its own in a bare field, that is where the thermal detection shines. But then you can't shoot either passive or active aiming with that thermal, so you still have to go back to night vision and find a way to send rounds. And then we also shot, that target was probably 15 yards away where we ran up to a car. We already knew where that target was, but there was a little bit of movement involved. Did you even use thermal? Because I didn't.
No, I didn't, but I also just forgot about it.
Okay.
I didn't notice it, and that goes back to the light settings and making sure that it doesn't so harshly contrast with your PVS 14 gain that it doesn't become distracting.
Yeah, at that distance, night vision worked well enough to not even prioritize thermal. In fact, I even, for one of the runs, just rolled thermal out of the way because it was more in the way than anything else. So
I will say, whenever I was messing with Nick and having him hide behind stuff, if I was shooting at something and then like had to reload or something like that and then pop back out and didn't immediately see the target again, I would check the thermal to see, oh, is there a foot sticking out? Is there like an elbow sticking out? At that point, you've stopped, you're standing still, and you're back into observation mode. Where did that person go? Okay, there they are, and I'm back on night vision.
Well, gear and night vision and thermal is super cool. We by no means want you guys to think that this is your whole world. This is just one part of the equation. And with that in mind, Sportsman's Guide is one of the sponsors of this video. Now, Sportsman's Guide offers a wide variety of products. They have hot weather gear, cold weather gear, MREs, ways to carry water when you're out on a hike with the fellas. And so if you guys are thinking beyond or maybe even before night vision and thermal, you should go check out Sportsman's Guide. We do have a discount code for their website. Save some money while you're getting equipment to keep you sustained and going. Maybe even try some new products at a cheaper price point because they do offer a wide variety of gear. Thank you, Sportsman's Guide, for sponsoring this video. Again, Discount code is in the description, go check it out. Navigation still shouldn't be limited to just walking. There's other modes of transportation that we have to consider. And Nick, poor guy, we gave him this rig and threw him on a dirt bike in the dark. Drew, thank you for holding camera for a moment. What was the experience with having two different images, thermal and night vision, on a dirt bike, moving a little faster?
It was very different than just running, your standard night vision. Like they both touched on already, the refresh rate for being on a dirt bike and moving that quickly is pretty bad, as well as the depth perception is not as equal to 14 or something like that. So it threw me off a little bit. I felt like if I got a little bit more time on it, I may be a little bit more comfortable, or with a higher end unit, I don't know, but that's kind of my initial reactions with just throwing that on and taking off.
Another mode of transportation that pretty much everyone has is just driving a car. It's very possible for a grid to go down and you still need to go from point A to point B in the dark. On your night vision, that's very doable. You're seeing the exact same thing that you would be if you were walking under night vision. On the other hand, because you can't see through glass, we touched on that already, using thermal in a car is just not possible. So it's the same concept as standing outside of a car and looking in, trying to see someone. You can't see through that glass. Now, if you roll a window down, you can see outside, obviously, but night vision shines if you are operating or moving around or looking into a vehicle. We've used the term budget this whole time, and cost is absolutely something to consider here. So what does it take to financially step into this world? So let's break it down real quick. If you go out and you buy a white Foss PVS-14, and we do encourage you to do white, not green, if you are going to be bridging, it's just gonna look a lot better when you throw that thermal on as well. This unit, a white Foss PVS-14 from Steel Industries, is $3,600 new. You can buy them cheaper used as well. The bridge from Raven is gonna be $399. There are other manufacturers out there that sell them for $775, and they effectively work the exact same.
But you had to piece all those together.
You
and This one
do.
at least comes
As one unit.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the bridge more in a minute and what you get if you do buy this bridge. The thermal itself, you have two options from Armacite. So this one is $3,300. The cheaper 32 core or 320 core is $2,300. So it's $1,000 cheaper. So all in, you're at about a little over $7 grand. And considering the fact that you have two different tools, thermal and night vision, for cheaper than most sets of dual tube night vision is incredible. The capabilities that you get here, not to mention the fact that you can scale. You could go buy a 14 and run it for a year, save up some money, go buy a thermal. You don't have to bite off everything all at the same time. Huge benefit. That's a great success, as they say.
Great success.
And there's a lot of manufacturers that make thermal and then they'll add on a bridge later on so that you can do something like this. Raven, they did a really good job of designing this unit along with a piece of thermal. It's a mum rail, so it's the same mounting design as something like a Fleer breech. One of my favorite things about this bridge is the fact that you can actually loosen, think like IDP stops, or is it IPD stops?
interpupillary.
So IPD stops. It's the same idea, but you can actually shift these left and right. Additionally, when you pull these up and down, you can run them the same as you would on dual tube night vision. So you get a lot of flexibility out of these, and then you can shift these left and right and determine where you want those to sit on your eye. It mounts onto a G24 just the same way. If I could change two things about this bridge, minimal complaints, not complaints, just my personal opinion. Number one is I want to be able to hand tighten these dials a little bit better without having to break out a tool so that they don't shift on me. If you do bump your head and your 14 gets knocked getting into a car, these can't get hand tight enough to actually sink down and bite and not move on you. It's a small complaint. You can break out a multi-tool and crank them down. That's just my findings.
Even like an O-ring on there would probably make a big difference.
That's a good point.
Which you could drop in yourself, I guess.
Sure, that's true. The other thing is I want to be able to get that thermal a little bit closer to my eye. It's not as forgiving as it is like a PVS-14 on how far away or close you can be and still get a full image through that thermal. So I want to actually be able to increase or decrease the distance of my thermal closer or further to my eye. That being said, with the flathead screwdriver, you can swap these around from left to right if you want to run your thermal on your left eye, your thermal on your left eye, your night vision on your left eye. You can turn all of those things around with a flathead.
And for me, the reason why I was like, yeah, this would be a cool video to do, this would be the perfect mount to include in it, was because, not because they were like, hey, we'd like to sponsor your video, but because it actually simplifies things for the customers. I'm not the smartest dude in the world. I'm not a big tech dude like Josh. I'm not like a gizmo gear guy compared to Josh. So anything that can be simplified on a helmet system, I am all for. That's why I have an M-Tech Strike that only takes one kind of...
You're pro.
Yeah, exactly. So being that I can just buy this mount and it's everything that I need, it takes specific thermal and a PVS 14, and I don't have to piecemeal everything together, I'll buy that instantly.
Yeah, I'll say one more thing about the bridge and thermal combo specifically. Because the battery pack is where it is on the thermal, and because they designed the bridge the way that they did, you can get your night vision and thermal device a lot closer together, and they're not bumping up next to each other like other devices do. This was obviously designed with running this system in mind. And despite the fact that I would love for that thermal to be a little bit higher quality, better refresh rate and such, simply putting it on your head and pulling those two units down together has had zero issues for me. They run together very well. So that is a design and engineering huge upside.
Okay, so let's be real. These coyotes are not going to feed my family. However, Factor Meals is a great way that I feed my family. Well, more specifically, that's how I feed myself, because I'm terrible at meal prep and I'm so busy that I don't always have time to think about it. So Factor's a great way to get pre-packaged meals delivered to you in the mail, and you could pick whatever your dietary needs are. Like right now, me and the wife, we're big on keto, so we're getting some keto meals in. But right now you can go to factormeals.com/DC50, get 50% off your first order, and move on with your day and do things way more fun than just like cooking and cleaning up after cooking and all that stuff. So anyways, I'm gonna smoke some oats. Let's go. So when we say budget, we know that budget is a subjective term because we all live on different budgets. Is $6,500 to $7,500 within your budget, and is it something that every single person should go out and buy? No, I would never say that every individual needs this. I will say that depending on where you live and how you live and what you want to be prepared for, it can absolutely be worth it. Growing up in Kentucky, and now that I live out here in Tennessee, I live out in the middle of nowhere, I'm completely capable of harvesting my own deer, turkey, whatever. In that scenario, yes, it's very worth it for me as an individual to have it for my own individual uses. In a city where night vision is way more important than thermal, not as important. But again, this goes back to it being a capability tool. If you're looking for a way to be valuable to your community, to your team, to your group of guys, to a collection of families that all have agreed to kind of help each other out, and everyone has the same night vision tech, but nobody has thermal, but you do,
you're the man.
You're the man.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes into, are you being an asset? And can this tool make you an asset to others? Yes, then it's worth it.
There's something else that's worth mentioning though. You can go buy NVGs that have a little bit, they don't articulate, for around that $7,500 price point, or used dual tubes that do articulate. The difference is you have to spend all that money at once if you are doing that. With this system, you can spend $3,000 and go buy a 14, run it for a year or two, and a lot of people will consider selling their 14 for a little bit less money and trying to upgrade to those dual tubes. Well, what if you just spend another $3,000 and get thermal? It's a lot easier to bite that off and then build your tools and your ability. So if you are running a 14, or you are considering upgrading, or you're not yet purchasing a 14 and you're trying to decide if you should keep saving, I would encourage you, gut reactions, go ahead and do the 14, run it and get good with night vision, and then consider upgrading to a thermal as well. That is, after running both systems, what I would encourage you to do. With that in mind though, you may still consider upgrading to dual tubes. So let's say that you had gone this route and you then upgraded to dual tubes 5-10 years later. would you still want to have that tool of a thermal, whether it's around your neck on a rifle or being able to loan out to a friend to just use?
Yeah, most of the time that I use thermal, it's in a pocket. And when we're stopped, I'll look for animals or look for people.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just put it around my neck or throw it in a pocket and use it as needed.
And the hard truth is, this tool, dual tube night vision, this tool, standalone thermal, this tool, standalone night vision, whatever it is that you're running, none of these tools are a complete piece of the puzzle. You ultimately need to be incorporating all of these one way or another, whether that's on a team, as an individual, inside of your family. And so the cheapest way at this point to make that possible is with a 14, an American-made bridge, and a piece of thermal. Of course, if you have more money, more funds over time, you can upgrade and build into a different system. But at face value, the best bang for your buck is just bridging the two units together. While there are downsides and there are deficiencies to just a 14, deficiencies to just this thermal, this budget but good quality thermal, it is getting your foot in the door and being able to have parts of that puzzle that can then be pushed together and used to maximize your own abilities.
Sorry, hold on. Oh, I missed the button. Oh, damn. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
All good?
That?
I don't know.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Okay. You ask me, how's that?
Okay.
Sorry, I remember the.
My God, Steve.